Hi, Division 15. So here I am again, ready to finish the last four chapters in our Magic Treehouse series, number 7, Sunset of the Sabertooth. To remind everybody where we were, at the end of the last chapter, Jack and Annie had fallen into a deep pit in the ground. And they thought they were stuck until this person has appeared looking down, and he's referred to as the sorcerer. So, chapter 7, which is what Miss Lyon will start right now, is called The Sorcerer's Gift. Here we go. The sorcerer didn't speak. He stared through the eye holes of an owl mask. "Help us, please," said Annie. And then the sorcerer threw a rope into the pit and Jack grabbed it. "I think he's going to pull us up," said Annie. So Jack looked and the sorcerer was already gone. Well, where did he go?" said Jack. "Tug on the rope," said Annie. Jack tugged and the rope tightened, and then it began to rise. "I'll go first," said Annie cheerfully. "Annie, this isn't a game. We have to take this seriously," said Jack. "Don't worry. I promise. I'll be careful." Jack gave her the rope. "Okay, hold on tight." Annie held the rope with both hands, and she pushed her feet against the side of the pit, and she rose into the air with the rope. She kept pressing against the side of the pit until she reached the very top. Jack saw the sorcerer reappear and help Annie up, and then they moved out of sight. Jack was puzzled. The sorcerer had used both hands to help pull Annie up. So who was holding the rope, thought Jack. "Wow!" Jack could hear Annie's voice. "What's going on up there?" thought Jack. The sorcerer came back and threw the rope down again. Jack grabbed it, and the rope started to rise. Jack held on tight. He started up, 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 and his hands began to burn. His arms felt like they were being pulled out of the sockets. But he kept holding on to the rope and his feet against the side of the pit. At the top, the sorcerer pulled Jack into a snowy ground floor. "Thanks," said Jack. The sorcerer was tall, and he wore a long fur robe. Jack could only see his eyes peeking through the owl mask. "Hey," said Annie. Jack turned. Annie was sitting on top of a woolly mammoth. "Squeak!" Peanut was sitting on top of the woolly mammoth's head. The mammoth looked like a giant elephant, but with shaggy reddish hair, long and curved tusks. On the other end of the rope was around the mammoth's huge neck. "Lulu pulled us up," said Annie. Lulu?" said Jack. "Don't you think she looks just like a Lulu?" said Annie. "Oh, brother," thought Jack. He walked up to the mammoth. "Hey, mammoth. Mammoth starts with M," said Annie. "Maybe Lulu is the special thing." "I don't think so," said Jack. The great creature knelt down, just like a circus elephant. "Whoa," said Annie as she clutched the mammoth's ears to keep from falling off. The sorcerer helped Jack climb onto the back of the woolly mammoth. "Thanks," said Jack. And then the sorcerer reached into his pouch and he pulled out a smooth white bone and he handed it to Jack. The bone was hollow. It had 4 holes along the side and 2 on the other side. Got a picture. "Oh man, I think this is a flute," said Jack. "Well, the book said that flutes could be made from mammoth bones." Jack tried to give the flute back to the sorcerer. "Nice," he said politely, but the sorcerer held up his hand. "He wants you to keep the mammoth bone," said Annie. "Mammoth bone. Hey, maybe this is the third thing," said Jack. He looked at the sorcerer. "Hey, do you know who Morgan is?" said Jack. But again, the sorcerer didn't answer. But his eyes sparkled with a sort of kindness. He turned away from Jack and untied the mammoth's rope, and then he whispered in the ear of the giant woolly animal. When the animal stood up, Jack and Annie gripped onto the coat to stop from falling off. He nestled behind his sister in the dip between the mammoth's head and this huge curve on his back. The mammoth began to take slow, plodding steps across the snow, but then picked up speed. "Where are we going?" said Jack. "To the treehouse," said Annie. "But how does he know where the treehouse is?" said Jack. "She," said Annie. "It's a girl, you know." "She just knows," said Annie. Jack looked back at his sister. The sorcerer was still standing there. in the snow, watching them leave. But at that moment, the clouds parted and the sun came out, and Jack was blinded by the brightest sunlight he'd ever seen. He squinted to see, but at that same moment, the sorcerer vanished. Chapter 8 is called The Great Parade. The huge mammoth walked across the open plain. "Look," said Annie, pointing to a herd of elk in the distance. They had great wide antlers. "Over there," said Jack, as he pointed to a herd of reindeer that was coming into view. They pranced gracefully across the snow, and then a woolly rhino joined them in open plain. Then a bison. An elk, a reindeer, a rhino, a bison, they all moved towards them, but at a distance. They seemed to be escorting Jack and Annie back to the treehouse. The snow was sparkling in the sunlight. This is like a parade, thought Jack. Fantastic. They were getting closer and closer to a grove of tall trees. "I told you," said Annie. "Lulu, she's taken us home." Just then, the mammoth let out a huge cry, and all the other animals bounded away. Peanut began to squeak loudly. Squeak! Jack looked around, and behind them was the saber-tooth. He was slinking across the snow. The woolly mammoth began to roar and plunged forward. Jack and Annie nearly fell off. Jack clutched Annie. She and Peanut clutched the mammoth's shaggy hair, and the mammoth thundered wildly across the ground. "Ah!" Jack and Annie yelled. The mammoth charged to the grove of trees, but the tiger had circled around the trees and stood between the tallest trees and the woolly mammoth. They were trapped. The saber-tooth began moving slowly towards the mammoth, and the woolly mammoth roared fiercely. Jack knew a saber-toothed tiger could kill any creature, including a woolly mammoth. The huge tiger's head was down, and his burning eyes were fixed on the woolly mammoth, his long white fangs glinting in the sunlight. This is a great picture. Chapter 9, Master of the Animals. The saber-tooth crept forward. Jack stared in horror. "Play the flute," said Annie. "Is she nuts?" thought Jack. No, try it," said Annie. Try it. So Jack held the mammoth bone flute to his mouth and he blew. The flute made a strange sound and the tiger froze. He glared at Jack. Jack's hand shook, and then the tiger began to growl again and take another step forward, and the mammoth roared and stomped its ground. "Play it," said Annie, "and keep playing it." Jack blew again, and the saber-toothed tiger froze. Jack kept blowing until he ran out of breath, and then the tiger began to snarl again. "He's still here," said Annie. "Keep it up." Jack closed his eyes and he took a deep breath, and then he blew as hard and as long as he could, and he covered and uncovered the holes in a pattern. The music sounded strange, almost eerie. It was as if they were coming from another world. "He's beginning to leave," said Annie. Jack raised his eyes, and the saber-tooth was beginning to slink off towards the cliffs. "We did it," said Annie. Jack lowered the flute, and he felt very tired. The mammoth waved her trunk happily. "To the treehouse, Lulu," said Annie. The woolly mammoth snorted and then lumbered towards the tallest tree. From the back of the mammoth, Jack grabbed the rope ladder. He held it for Annie. She stroked the mammoth's giant ear. "Bye-bye, Lulu. Thank you," she said. Annie grabbed the rope ladder, and she started up, Peanut climbing up too. They disappeared into the treehouse. Jack climbed onto the rope ladder, and then he looked back at the woolly mammoth. "Bye-bye, girl," he said. "You should go home now, and watch out for that saber-tooth." The mammoth walked away into the sunset, and when Jack couldn't see her anymore, he finished going up the rope ladder. He pulled himself into the treehouse. "Ta-da!" said Annie. She handed the Pennsylvania book to Jack. Jack smiled. Well, now they were positive that they had found the correct M thing. Their mission was complete. "Before we leave, we've got to give our coats back." "Oh, yeah," said Jack. They took off the long reindeer skin coats and dropped them to the ground. Oh, brr, said Annie. I hope the Cro-Magnon people can find them. Jack stared out the window. He wanted to take one last look at this amazing prehistoric world. The sun was setting behind the hills. 4 people again began to cross across the snowy plains. It was the same Cro-Magnon family. Hey, shouted Jack. Shh, said Annie. The Cro-Magnon stopped and peered in Jack's and Annie's direction. We left your reindeer skins over here, down there, said Annie, pointing to the ground. The tallest person stepped forward and began to raise his spear. I think it's time to go, said Jack. He grabbed the Pennsylvania book. He found the picture of Frog Creek Woods and he pointed to it. I wish we could go home, said Jack. Goodbye and good luck, Annie called, waving out the window. The wind began to blow. The treehouse began to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still, absolutely still. Chapter 10, This Age. Birds sang. The air was soft and warm. Oh, I sure hope those people find their coats, said Annie. Me too, said Jack, pushing his glasses back into place. Squeak, said the mouse. Hey, do you know... Sorry, hey, you. How did you find the sorcerer to help us? She asked Peanut. Squeak, said the mouse. It's a secret, eh? Said Annie. She turned to Jack. Where did we put that flute? He held up the mammoth bone and then placed it next to the carved M on the floor of the treehouse, beside the mango from the rainforest and the moonstone from the time of the ninjas. Mango, moonstone, mammoth bone, said Annie. You know, we need one more thing and then Morgan will be free from her spell. I think we should do it tomorrow, said Jack. Annie patted Peanut on the head. Bye-bye, you, she said. She started down the rope ladder, and Jack gathered his things. He paused and glanced at the mouse. She stared at him with big brown eyes. Thanks for helping us again, he said. Then he climbed down the rope ladder and jumped onto the ground. Jack and Annie ran through Frog Creek Woods onto their street. Their neighborhood looked rosy in the sunset. It's great to be back in our time, said Jack. Safe and warm and almost home. I'm glad we didn't have to go hunting for our dinner back there, he said. Yeah, Mom and Dad already have that at the supermarket. And I hope they trap some spaghetti and meatballs for us. That sounds good. I hope they trap pizza for us, said Annie. I'm starving. Let's hurry. They ran up the sidewalk, through their front door, and said, We're home, shouted Jack and Annie. And what's for dinner? And at the picture, we got a picture of a plate of spaghetti, which I know many of you, it's one of your favorite meals. Okay, that's the end of this book. Miss Lion will surprise you tomorrow with the starting of our next book. All right, tune in then. I hope you guys are safe and know how much I miss and love you all. Bye.